Hello, welcome again to Tech Turks. Today I have the pleasure of Temie Tubosun, the founder of LifeBank, another life-saving company, and so we'll hear more of the business from her. So Temie, welcome to Tech Turks, and thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
LifeBank,
Right.
how did it start? Because I think from what I read about your background,
Right.
I mean, you shouldn't be in this business. Right? So,
Right. I think the biggest thing for me is noticing a problem, right, and then figuring out that I could solve it, right, and then just going ahead with it. So I do have a bit of experience in healthcare. I studied international management, but I focused on healthcare all my career. So I worked at WHO in Switzerland, I worked at UNDP in East Africa, and worked at a few health systems in the US. I grew up in the US and I studied in the US. So when I came back to Nigeria, I knew it was going to be healthcare, and that's what I wanted to do. But I come to healthcare as a operational expert or like a management person in healthcare. So that's my career path. But it's also a personal story, right? One of the highest, so I usually start these things by sort of giving you the picture of the problem. So one of the highest cause of maternal mortality in the developing world and in Africa, especially in Nigeria, is something called postpartum hemorrhage. Basically, a mom gives birth and then she starts bleeding and then bleeds and then she goes into shock and then she dies. So in those situations, if you don't get enough blood to her on time, stop the bleeding and get blood to her, she will die. That's the fact. So when I noticed this problem, and I became a mom myself, so it sort of showed me the reality, and I had a difficult birth. I was very lucky to be in the US to get access to excellent healthcare. So when I came back with my child to Nigeria, I decided to do something about maternal mortality. And I knew that was going to be sort of like my life's work. And I'd just turned 30 and I really wanted to do something different and to do something really outstanding. So I started talking to people about blood, and I realized that blood banks were actually discarding blood, right? Because blood is a short shelf life product. It only lasts 6 weeks, right? So after 6 weeks, then you have to discard it. So at the same time, people were dying from blood shortage, and people were discarding blood at the same time. So it was both a shortage and a surplus in the market.
So the management issue.
It was a management, a communication issue, right? And I knew technology could solve that. So that's why technology part started. And then shortly after, so we had built the tech app and we started talking to customers about it. And then we found out that there was no way to get the blood. So even if hospitals know where the blood was, it would not get to the hospital quickly enough, right? Because it's also a time-sensitive thing. So we couldn't go to a logistics company and say, help us move this blood, because it's they couldn't schedule it. It's an on-demand product.
So you have to own that logistics.
Exactly. So we had to build a logistics platform. So that's how LifeBank was born. So LifeBank helps hospitals discover the essential medical products they need, starting with blood, and then we deliver it to them, to the hospital in the right condition and on time.
So I mean that's quite a feat. So how did you build? And I think blood is a very precious commodity, and also it has certain qualities. One of them is that you must trust what is there. So how did you build trust on that your platform? Why do people trust LifeBank?
Right. So it's very simple. Technology actually helps with that. So one of the first things we do is validate where the blood was tested, who the blood bank is. And thankfully enough, there was a rule in Lagos that any blood that you transfuse at a hospital has to be tested by the state and given a code by the state. So one of the first things we do is, before blood banks can list, so the way we work is, first blood bank have to list their products on our platform, on our tech platform. Say, I have 10 bags of O negative blood. So you go on LifeBank's platform and list it and tell me the code that so we first validate the code that the government gave the blood first. and technology really helps us do that. So that's one of the ways we build trust into our platform. So first, it's validated. Two, we also ensure that if there's any problem, we can actually identify the blood bank that had that problem and then coach them to sort of change their processes or advise the government to shut them down, right? So at some point, at a particular threshold. So those are the sort of things that technology helps us do. It sort of brings transparency and openness into this sector that has been very opaque and very insular for a very long time.
So first of all, you're giving it transparency and you're also giving it legitimacy as
absolutely,
well. And
absolutely.
also creating an opportunity for more LifeBanks
exactly.
To start.
Exactly.
So how many do we have? I mean, how many do we have enough in Lagos? Let's take Lagos for it. Do we have enough in Lagos? How many more do you think that we need?
So in Lagos, we don't have enough blood. I think it's just countrywide and Africa, actually continent-wide. Africans generally don't give blood, so there's a significant shortage. Fortunately or unfortunately, we always find a way to sort of plug the gap. So we've created a commercial platform for blood donation. So sometimes blood donors go give blood, and 60% of the blood we move in Nigeria is from commercial donors. So people who are being paid to give blood. So there's a bit of that. One of my goals through LifeBank is to build a platform where it's completely voluntary and not paid donors. So that's one of the things we're working on. However, so the way the market works is you have a lot of, one-man businesses running blood banks. So very micro businesses, just one guy, running his business day in, day out, and then getting donors, collecting the blood, and then testing it, and then keeping it and ready for hospitals that need it. So one of the insights I have is there's room for a big player in this market, or alternatively, what LifeBank does is we like to say that we're the biggest blood bank in Lagos, right? Maybe even in Nigeria. But we don't have any blood, right? But at any given time, we have about 1,000 units of blood on our platform at any given time.
So 1,000 units of blood, how many? So what's that? How many human beings does that?
Right. I mean, so it depends.
Yes.
So if someone is bleeding really, really fast, they might need 10 pints of blood. Okay. Right. If someone is like maybe just anemic.
How many pints in a unit?
So a unit is a pint, so it's in a bag of blood. It's very similar to, I think it's 50 millimeters, very similar to a bag of pure water. So that's 1 unit. So at any given time, depending on how fast you're bleeding, you might need between 2 pints, 2 units, and 10 units, or even 50 units. I know someone who was bleeding and had a huge bleed, so they had to just keep replacing the blood as it's coming out, replacing the blood. So she got up to like 35 units of blood at once. So it really depends. But we generally have about 1,000 per day.
So on average, about 100 people you can save in a day.
Exactly.
So that's good to know.
Yeah.
So this must be capital intensive because first of all, so the app is the platform, but then there's the logistic parts, and there's also the units that have to store the blood because you just can't carry it in any other bag. So how have you raised funding, and if you're going to grow, how do you intend to
So
do that?
A lot of times people look at LifeBank and are not quite clear what structure we run. We're a business, right? We're not an NGO, we're not a charity organization, we are a company and we're a business and we run that platform. We have a business model and we make money. We make quite a lot of money, right, for such a young company. But we're also an impactful company. So we have a dual bottom line, is how I like to put it. So my investors and our board, judges my performance based on two rules. Are you valuable financially, but are you also making impact in people's lives? And luckily for us, every single unit of blood we have is impactful.
When the business of course,
exactly. So every unit of products we move is impactful. It goes to save someone's life. So it's really, we're dual bottom line. However, the way we get capital is we raise funding. So we have investors, we have technology investors that invest in LifeBank in exchange for returns. We're about to close our seed round. We've raised a pre-seed round. So we raise money and we raise funding in that way.
So in a day, how many trips do you make? Where do you want to get to? So just give us some numbers so we can appreciate the scale of the business.
So it's still very small scale. We're 19 months old, so we're very young. We've moved about 8,000 units of products in the last 19 months. We've saved about 1,800 people. As in like actual human beings in Nigeria that our products helped to save their lives. We have about 94 hospitals signed up on our platform at the moment, but we actually had to slow down our growth because it's an equilibrium. So you have to maintain that equilibrium at any given time. Right now we do about 4 trips a day, but with the bulk of the trips being on weekends. Because usually people go out, they have, they have accidents, and then there's a lot of emergency around weekends. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday is like our big days, and on those days we do about like 10 trips a day. So hospitals are constantly calling us. Our goal is to get nationwide, right? So we are both expanding the market where we operate, as well as expanding what we move. So our innovation is not just, the reality of our innovation, it's discovery in the health sector and delivery in the health sector. So it's not really about blood. Blood happened to be what I personally cared about, so that's what I started with. But it's about helping hospitals discover whatever they need. So blood, there's a particular state in northern Nigeria, Gombe State, that has a huge snake problem. So the people, about 100 people died last month because of snake bites. And the reason why is the hospitals didn't have anti-venoms. So that's one of the things LifeBank will start moving when we get to Gombe State. There are things like oxygen, right? A lot of people, there was a viral story a few months ago about a young man who died because 5 hospitals in Lagos didn't have oxygen available at that time. That's one of the problems LifeBank can solve. Vaccines, organs, whatever the health system needs to discover, we can help them do that, and then we can deliver it to them in the right condition and on time. So we want to do that. So we want to expand what we move, as well as expand where we move them. So in the next 18 months, we're going to be moving to Abuja, Kaduna, perhaps even Accra. So those are the plans we have.
So let me ask a question. So what is determining your decision on where you're going to move next? You said Abuja, Kaduna. So what are the critical success? What are the factors that say we're going to go here instead of go here?
Right. So we have 2 markets, right? We have the highly private market, right? And we have the government market. So service delivery in healthcare in Nigeria, about 60% is delivered at government hospitals. So in the entire country, and about 40% is delivered in private hospitals. So the way we work is we want to be able to show our investors in the market that we can do both markets very well. So we want to do private markets, like places like Abuja, Accra, Lagos, of course, and maybe even Nairobi, and those big cities where there are a lot of private hospitals, a lot of private hospital systems. At the same time, the rest of Africa, if we're going to be, which one of our goals is to be in every single village in Africa and reach every hospital on the entire continent. If we're going to do that, we need to be able to work with government in markets where the government is the biggest provider of healthcare. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to try Kaduna to see and to test if our innovation can work in such markets.
Okay. Since you have a technology platform, how important is data? So what kind of data are you collecting, and how important is data in your business? And how is it driving? And what kind of data are you finding that you didn't expect would happen?
Absolutely. So one of the first, so we say we do 4 Ds, right? The discovery, delivery, donors, as well as data. I think data is huge, especially in the healthcare market, because data helps you predict, right? Helps you sort of make predictions on what you need, and it helps you sort of make your logistics more efficient. So one of the ways we are using data is, work on our logistics and make sure that hospitals are actually getting what they need ahead of time. So one of the insights we've found with just in 18 months that we've...
You really told me one.
Exactly, the 4 days, exactly. So on those 4
Yeah.
days, you make sure that, so maybe Thursday, you start calling, you make sure all the blood banks have enough stock, because those are the hot days, right?
Yeah.
So you make sure that there's enough blood in the system for those 4 days. So that's a significant insight. Insights around blood, the sort of blood types that are most common, that people need the most. For example, there's an interesting story that I always tell. There's a particular blood bank that is there's a particular blood type that's very rare in Nigeria. It's called AB negative. So because it's so rare, blood banks will not stock it. So if you show up at a blood bank and say, I want to give blood, and they test your blood type and they find it's AB negative, it's not useful for them because it's so rare. People don't really need it. So they tell you to go that you can't give blood. But whenever there is a situation where people need that blood, they most likely will die because there is no blood stock.
Wow.
So
and
one
of
of
course,
the
you have a 6 weeks, you can't keep it for 6 weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah, more than 6 weeks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things we did, we now created a rare blood type platform, right? So that we can now figure out who are the people who have that blood type. Are they available? So whenever there's somebody who needs that blood type, we can definitely call them and say, go and give blood. And that actually happened. So we had a patient who died because of that particular problem. And then a few months after we built the rare type, like almost 2 weeks later, there was a foreigner, a British man, who came into the country and needed that specific blood type, just to stabilize him enough to be flown out of Nigeria. And they called me. Somebody just happened to have my number, and they gave me a call, and we were able to find a donor for him the next morning. So they called me around 3 p.m. on a day. The next morning by 8 a.m. there was a donor in the hospital, and he got the blood he needed and was flown out of Nigeria. So those are the sort of insights that data helps us, figure out. And the interesting thing about AB negative, that particular blood type, is a lot of Africans, a lot of people of African origin don't have that blood type. Right? It's very rare in people of African origin. And those are the sort of data that we sort of start finding out.
I'm going to check mine. If it's AB negative, when I have to donate,
absolutely.
It'll cost a premium.
Yeah.
Okay, one more last question before we go.
Right.
So the people that donate, right? What percentage are male or female?
Right.
On the voluntary and the commercial type.
That's interesting. Actually, I think all I would say, I don't have raw data on this, but I would say about 80% of voluntary donors are women.
Women giving back all the time.
And probably maybe I don't know, 80% of commercial donors are men. Usually, students and all, a lot of students do it, a lot of people who are destitute do it. So that's how it works. But I like to say that men are the best blood donors, right? We're actually running a campaign this month that says real men give blood. And maybe I'll come back to you on that. So one of the things is, men can give blood 4 times a year, but women can only give 3 times a year. Because of menstrual cycle, because women generally have less blood than men do. So men are the best blood donors. So a lot of the things we're doing at LifeBank with our donor platform is to try to encourage men and try to push them to go out there and give blood, because they're the best blood donors. Because then once you convince one man to do it regularly, you get 4 pints every year. And it can go a long way in saving lives.
And Christmas is actually one of the times that you need a lot of blood.
Absolutely.
So maybe you need to come back to us.
Absolutely.
Real men of diamond giving blood.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
And we can continue the conversation after.
Awesome.
Thank you.